You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast.
Hey, what's going on, money makers? Welcome back to Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make some more money. Today on the show, we're going to be talking a little bit about entrepreneurship with my new friend, David Waldy. David, the fierce empathy coach, helps entrepreneurs scale their businesses without sacrificing their fulfillment, family, or well-being. A former corporate leader turned serial entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and business strategist. He's consulted for 7 to 9 figure brands, trained leaders in 40 plus countries, and closed over $10 million in face-to-face sales. As a former head trainer for Tony Robbins, David blends empathy with strategic execution to help high performers master their mindset, grow their income, and build businesses that align with their values. He's a husband, father of 4, Spartan finisher, believes high achievement does not require sacrificing what matters most, which is perfect for our discussion today here on the show. But before we jump in, if you're tuning in, you're wondering how I go about building the relationships with some of the amazing people I've had on this show or on my other show, Travis Makes Friends. It's been through the podcast. The podcast has been the surprise Trojan horse for me when it comes to connecting with whoever I want to connect with. It also helps me grow my personal brand, sharpen my expertise, build an audience, and actually pays me money. It pays me, I get sponsors. They pay me money to do all of those things that are also all really good for me. So for a limited time, I have 1 or 2 podcast coaching spots open in my calendar for one-on-one podcast coaching. If you're a 7, 8, 9 figure entrepreneur, you got some money to spend, and you want to start a podcast that's going to actually help you move the needle for certain aspects of your business. TravisChappell.com/coaching. There's a quick application right there. See if we're a good fit to work together. I don't know how long I'll do it. So if you're at all thinking about doing this, head over there sooner rather than later. TravisChappell.com/coaching. We'll jump on a call and see if we should work together to get your podcast out into the world or to improve your existing podcast. Either one. Now, without further ado, David Waldy, what is up, my man? Welcome to the show.
What's up, homie? How you doing, man?
I'm chilling now. It's been a kind of a hectic morning, as we discussed before we hit record. But hey, such is life when you have a couple young kids and a business and the podcast and all that stuff. So we made it is the important thing.
I love it. I'm sure there's people listening who can definitely relate to the chaos. If you've got kids, you got a business, or you're trying to get that side hustle on, you're trying to just a lot of people I know in the world we live in are juggling many balls. So I'm excited today for us to dive in and hopefully help and add some value and show some ways that we can help minimize that stress, calm the chaos.
Yeah, the chaos is a great way to say it. I literally thought that yesterday when I was like walking around there. When you have kids, it's just like young kids. Everything, it's just, there's always a mess, right? Like there's like whatever room you just cleaned up, you walk into the next room, and then like while you were cleaning up that room, there was a mess being made in the room next to you. And it was just like one of the yesterday I was just kind of like walking around, I was just like, this is just a stage in life. And I heard like Matthew McConaughey or Ryan Reynolds, like some A-list celebrity with small kids, basically say this. They were just like, they got asked what their best parenting advice was. Kind of like, just embrace the chaos and just know like this is a phase of life. It's a stage of life that you're going to ache for at some point later on. And so in the meantime, you just gotta just know that sometimes you're going to have sticky countertops, which is like my particular, like that's my pet peeve in particular. But yeah, sometimes you got to just embrace the chaos, man. It's all part of the journey. Let's jump into some money conversation here, David. First off, just a softball question to get us started. How do you currently make money?
Yeah, so I currently make money through a few different verticals. I own or am a partner in 4 different businesses. We've got a petrochemical oil and gas company. I have a marketing agency, a payment processing company, and then I'm also in the coaching consulting world. And so a few different ways that income flows in. Also, I've leveraged the heck out of social media, and I get paid pretty well from TikTok, which is nice. And I was glad it didn't go away. So,
nice.
Built a decent following there. I've also played around with TikTok Shop, and it's been cool. Okay. So I'm always just looking for different opportunities, but I'm always looking for opportunities that don't take a lot of time. And so it's one of those things that. Everyone has different strengths, different gifts, different abilities. And so what I tell people is is identify. You've heard the concept of Ikigai,
Yep.
Ikigai. Anyone who's listening, look that up. It's a great tool to help kind of direct you and saying, wow, there's so many different options. Should I do affiliate marketing, or should I do, social selling, or should I start my own business? Should I get into commission only sales? There's no limit to the amount of opportunities that are out there. I think it's just about people learning who they are and then leaning into their strengths and capitalizing on those strengths.
Cool, man. I just dropped you a follow over on TikTok. So
Come on.
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I know that's all you were hoping for from this conversation. But yeah, dude, I completely agree with you. I want to ask you this way to bridge the gap here for people listening.
Yeah,
How did you first start making money?
absolutely.
Your first paycheck, what was that?
So my first paycheck was actually from my dad. My dad was an entrepreneur. He owned his own vet clinic. And I'll never forget, there was a day that he asked me to help him and there's a really useful lesson in this story, actually, Travis. He asked me to help him re-brick the front of his vet clinic. And so basically all these dogs and animals coming in, there was this brick area out in front of his clinic is in Topeka, Kansas. And there was a day on a Saturday, he said, hey, if you'll come in and help me with the brick, then I'll pay you. And so we originally agreed to a certain number of dollars per hour. I was probably like 10 years old, and I'm sure he said like $5 an hour or something like that. So, but even for a 10-year-old, baseball cards, Pokemon cards, it's money. You want to make money. And I remember it came out about 2 or 3 hours after we had started, and I had made zero progress. And I don't know what was going through my mind at the time, but I guarantee you, as a 10-year-old kid, I was thinking, man, if I'm making $5 an hour, why go fast? Why don't I just like take the full day and make like my $40 or whatever it is? And so he came out and he said, buddy, would you be willing to restructure our agreement? And I said, well, it depends. And he said, what if I pay you per brick? But here are the stipulations. If I pay you per brick, then it has to be like, I have to approve it. It's got to look good. It's got to be exactly how it's done. And I remember something connected in me that day, Travis. Is a valuable lesson from my dad. I finished that entire area, and I can't remember how much money I made, but I remember being so proud of the work that I had done, and I had finished before the end of the day. And I remember getting paid. I think he paid me like $100-something bucks, and because he had told me, he's like, if you don't finish this, I'm going to have to pay somebody else to come do it. And what that taught me is something that stuck with me my entire life is performance-based pay. Is that learning how to put myself into a position where my compensation was directly tied to the results that I created. And so just like you, Travis, early on, I was a huge fan of commission sales. It was terrifying. If you don't go out and kill something and drag it home, you're not making any money. And so most of my jobs for my early career, they were in some type of sales. And even if it wasn't 100% commission, it was a base, and I needed to have, I didn't want to have an upper limit to how much I could make. And so that actually helped me tremendously of learning how to add more value to people that I was taking in payment, rather than what many of us are conditioned to believe is like, okay, how much per hour? Like how much per hour for me to sit in front of this computer or to take orders or to do whatever it was. My dad taught me an invaluable lesson that I've clung to this day. And everything now that I get paid is based on value I'm adding to other people, and it's results based.
Yeah. Stop trading time for dollars.
Yeah.
There's another way to do it. There's a better way to do it. And the obvious one is sales, but that doesn't mean that it's the only one.
Right.
There's a lot of other jobs and positions that you can work in some sort of like pay for performance model or something. And I mean, this probably won't work for everybody listening, but I would bet a good amount of money that a fair percentage of the audience, if they went to their boss or their employer and they asked them for less money than what they're currently making, but with the ability to bonus at more than what they're currently making based on performance, I bet you anything, if that boss or if that structure is at all like entrepreneurial or flexible, I bet you they would be 100% open to at least hearing you out.
Absolutely.
You led with that value piece. Like, look, I'm going to save you money right off the bat. Pay me less, guaranteed money. All I want is the ability to perform and get paid a little bit more than what I'm currently getting paid. If you and I come up with these parameters If we set this bonus structure up correctly, and I am overperforming for what you initially thought this position would be able to perform, I just want to know that there's going to be financial compensation that's going to be, in correlation with how much I'm performing, no matter the job role. I bet you anything, you would be surprised at how many people would be able to do some sort of a structured agreement like that.
Yeah, I love it because I mean, especially coming from an entrepreneurial background, I was terrified of entrepreneurship because I saw an example in my dad's life of him giving up on his dream,
Mm.
and so it ended up destroying my family. It's why my parents got divorced, and so I had a huge aversion to anything entrepreneurship, but I didn't necessarily have that pertaining to sales. And so, to tie to what you're saying, Travis, for anyone listening, there's a term that we use in business called KPI. So this is called your key performance indicators. It's very, very different depending on the industry. But if you effectively create, like say, hey, boss, here are the key performance indicators, the things you've told me based on my roles and responsibilities that you want to see. And what I'd like to create is a baseline, your minimum threshold of expectations of saying like, hey, if you're doing this, you're doing a good job. You can have a job here, right? Anything above this, figure out a compensation model. And what a lot of people don't understand who don't come from an entrepreneurial background is that there's only so much capital to go around oftentimes in a business. And so when people go to a boss and they're like, hey, I want a raise, they're not thinking about the fact that the boss has to compensate for that somewhere. And if that money's not flowing into the business or there's not value being added to the business, you can't just magically come up with more money. I mean, you can do capital raises and you can use loans and things like that. But for the average small business owner, they're going to be very incentivized to pay you well if you're helping them offset the cost by adding more value. And so if you can sit down and have a conversation with your boss and say, boss, I don't know necessarily what these things. I heard these two dudes named David and Travis talking about KPI and like what that means, but I'd like to figure out a structure where I can add more value to you and your business and be paid more. And that's what I think people need to lead with, Travis, is that if you go in with a self-serving mindset in any of these conversations, it's not going to work out well for you. You have to seek to serve first and add value. And if you go to them humbly and you say, man, I want to add your, whoever it is, you say, I want to add more value to the company, but I do want to be compensated accordingly. There's very few people that are going to say no.
Yeah, it's the WIFT question, bro. WIIFT. What's in it for them?
There you go.
Everybody comes into it with the "what's in it for me" thing. How do I get paid more? I want more money. I want this. I want that, and they make demands of not just their boss. This is just demands on the universe, demands on the world itself, on corporations, on structures, on society. They make demands on everybody. Yeah. You're going to get a lot farther when you start thinking about, well, what's in it for them?
Yeah.
Absolutely. How could I structure this in a way where it's impossible for them to say no, because it just makes complete sense for both of us? And if you find yourself in a structure that's completely rigid and there is no flexibility there, then it might be an indicator that maybe you've reached your limit already at that place and you should start looking elsewhere. And I'm being very, very serious about that. Like if you are trying these things and you're trying to reach up and you're trying to add more value, some companies just don't want it. For a perfect example, man, my wife was at this company before, and the company was just ran very poorly. From the top down, leadership structure was terrible. There's so many gaps in the structure. And me as an entrepreneur, I sat down with her and I was like, there's so much opportunity here for you to like jump into these different, things. What if you just put this together and then pitch this to them and try to come, and she did all this additional work to try to, fill in the gaps in their terrible operating structure. And then eventually it just didn't end up working out. The company was just like, that's just not how they operated. So eventually she left that company. And now she's running our franchise. We bought a Aussie ball franchise.
Come on.
So she runs that now every day. So it was just like, okay, so you're going to cap me and you're not going to improve processes and you're not going to improve the system that you've built here. Then I'm gone. And like, yeah, that hurt us financially at first because she didn't have a backup, and luckily we were in a place financially where it didn't really matter too much. But then at that point, she was able to go out and do something, and now she's like way more fulfilled in her work. Even though obviously she's an entrepreneur now, and we're only 4 or 5 months in, so she is making less money than she was when she was at that like job job. But she's way happier and way more fulfilled, like doing the work that she's doing, because she sees there's a correlation between how much effort she puts in and what her paycheck at the end of the month is going to be. And I think that
Yeah.
that's a big unlock. And so you got to be willing. You got to be willing to make the ask.
Yeah.
You know,
And I love that.
half
I'm
of
sorry.
money making is being willing to make the ask.
That's it. I mean, it's in sales. It's in. I've got a client right now who he works for a very well-to-do established brand that's in the AI space. They're based out of Abu Dhabi, and he's dealing with a lot of just passivity that he's carried in his life as a man. And this is for men and for women. Is that if you're willing to be assertive and ask for what you want, and you've got the confidence to ask for what you want, you will get so far in life, because the
Yeah.
worst thing that they can say is no.
Mhm.
But if you don't ask, it's already a no. It's a guaranteed no.
Yep.
But you've got to be willing to take that leap and say, hey, here's what I want, and here's why, and this is what I think we can do to make sure that this makes sense. And I love, Travis, that you said more effort, because a lot of times people get confused. You said your wife, more effort, that there's more compensation, there's more opportunity. I think a lot of times people get confused between effort and time. They're like, well, I'm going to have to give more time.
Correct.
And yes, you may have to give some time up front, but it's something that if you're playing the long game, like, get out of this micro 1 month mentality and look 6 months, look 12 months, look, 24 months down the line. Like, I've done equity deals with clients before. And for those that aren't familiar with what that means, rather than compensation directly up front of paying me my fee, I've played the long game of saying, if you'll give me X percentage of your company and we work together and we're able to achieve these results, then I want to be able to get a payout from that.
Yeah.
And so those things have been extremely lucrative. I've got one this year that if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I could imagine stepping into a business that was going to, do 60 million in margin. So we're talking at net profit, and that I'm going to be able to benefit from that, and my family and my future generations, my team and everyone else, I would have laughed at you. I'd have been like, that's crazy. But what happened is, a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with a business and an owner that I believed in. I said, hey, rather than you paying me, 5-10 grand a month, why don't we work out a structure where I can have equity in the company? We'll do a small retainer, and we'll work together and build this thing together. And it's paid off. But a lot of times people don't realize that effort comes with using your mind and thinking about, how can I play the long game, add more value, not just how can I make an extra grand this month. Not that that's a bad thing, but you've got to get out of that mindset if you really want to start to build wealth.
Yeah, and it's all kind of in stages, right? Like if you have if you're currently sitting there in debt and you have no emergency savings, and you're probably going to have to make some more, rigid choices in the meantime. Like you probably are going to have to worry about, I need $1,000 extra next month. But this is where the financial discipline world and personal finance really comes into play. Because you got to, like, this is like the foundational piece, is you have to learn financial discipline. You have to learn where your money is going. You got to be able to set a budget and stick to it. And then once you can start taking in an extra $500 a month, $250 a month, $1,000 a month, and you can get an emergency savings going a little bit, you get it up to $1,000, $2,000, and then you can start attacking that debt with the extra money. Once you're in a position where you're debt free and you have emergency savings, now you're able to go to these conversations in a position of confidence, a position of control, where then you have the ability to go, like, you know what, I'm no longer thinking about like how I'm going to pay my rent this month. I'm thinking about, how do I put myself in a position to work on something every day that fulfills me, brings me meaning, joy, happiness, and allows me to be able to do the things that I want to really be able to do. But you're going to have to sacrifice in the meantime to be able to put yourself in a position to do that really well. The only reason that my wife's able to leave that job and then we were able to just go buy a franchise is because we've worked hard and sacrificed in other ways financially to put ourselves in a position where that was something that we were able to do. And, I don't take that for granted at all. It's not a position a lot of people are in. But again, we were always willing to do what it took in order to make sure that we we're putting ourselves in a good position to do what we wanted to do. And I literally just said that to my wife the other day, man. It was like we were reminiscing on a time where we had broken a lease. It was when I was making the transition from sales to podcasting, and it took a massive pay cut for the first time ever. And we broke our lease on this beautiful home in a nice part of Vegas, and we moved in with my brother-in-law. And our total rent to move in with my brother-in-law at his 2-bedroom apartment and split everything was $500 a month for rent and utilities, instead of $3,500 a month. No car payments, no nothing. We shrunk everything. But I remember I talked to my wife about that recently, and I was like, I appreciate that. I appreciate you, first of all, for being supportive and always, being willing to do these things with me. But I was also like, I don't look at any of those times of quote unquote sacrifice in a bad light now.
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't look back on that time and go, man, that was really tough, but we made it through. It was just like, I don't know, we just did what it took. We knew, like, it's for a time, it's for a season, but to sacrifice for a season, to set yourself up to live how you want to live, it just makes sense to me. And I can't it's hard for me to think about the mindset that says I want to live an extraordinary life, but then I'm not willing to do extraordinary things to get there. But it just doesn't compute to me. Like, you are not entitled to live your dream life. You do not deserve to live your dream life just because you're alive. That's not how it works. You're going to have to take some steps to make it work, and you're going to have to say no to things that 90% of people say yes to. That's why they're in the 90%. You know what I'm saying? Like, the top 10%, the top 5%, the top 1%, they're in those percentages because they've made better decisions throughout their life. As like a broad statement. Obviously, there's specific situations where there's privilege, and there's people who inherit lots of money and they're in a different financial position. I'm not talking about those people. Okay, the vast majority of millionaires are new millionaires.
Yeah.
They are not people who've received insane sums of money. They're people who just looked at the hand that they were dealt, understood the reality of their situation, and then took steps to ensure that they were going to end up in a different position than the one that they were in. And it's just part of the process.
I don't agree with everything that Dave Ramsey says, but Ramsey conducted the most extensive research project on millionaires in the United States, next to the Millionaire Next Door, which was Tom Stanley. And so for those that haven't read the Millionaire Next Door, and what the data showed, it's undeniable, is that 80+% of millionaires in the United States are first generation millionaires. And so there's not as many trust fund babies as people think. There's not a lot of people out there that have inherited. Most of the overwhelming majority are first generation wealthy, and they're coming from just Main Street USA. People that are willing to get their hands dirty. They're willing to say, hey, I know how to do this well. I want to add value. And so that book, for everyone listening, The Millionaire Next Door, I would encourage you to grab that book. And then also The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. If you're in that position right now where you're like, David, Travis, this sounds great, but you guys are way over my head right now. I am the person who needs to make $500 a month. I am the person who needs to make $1,000 a month. It's going to start with cutting your expenses, but there comes a point where, guess what? Your Starbucks isn't your problem, right? The $5 latte is not your actual problem. It has to do with financial literacy and learning. And when I say financial literacy, people get scared of that. I'm saying just understand how savings work and checking works and investments, and how compound interest works,
and how credit card debt cripples you.
How credit card debt, it's dangerous. And when you start to learn these things, that's where I think Travis is probably you're talking about the effort, is like, be willing to exert the effort to learn. Because I think I saw a recent statistic, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I believe it, is that 90% of people that grow up in the United States, they don't touch a book after they graduate high school. 90%. And I'm like, if you just pick up a book, man,
Yeah.
And you learn from the distillation of wisdom from these people that have made a lot of mistakes and poured their heart and soul into writing a book.
Yep.
You're setting yourself up for that long tail success, but it's going to take time, and it's not going to happen overnight, and you're going to have to grind. That's why I love, Travis, you're big on relationships. That's why you need to level up your network. You start hanging out with different people. You start building relationships and adding value, and you'll pick your head up like 5 years down the line and be like, dude, I don't even recognize my life anymore. This is amazing. I still got problems and challenges. Like, things, a lot of those
They don't go away. Yeah.
But I will say that when you develop some semblance of financial literacy, it's a lot easier to tackle certain problems that you really can't when you're in that financial scarcity and you're just trying to make it month to month.
Yeah. What are a couple of those like first foundational principles that folks should learn about money?
So I'd say the first principle is actually kind of a mindset principle. Is that I had a mentor of mine tell me, and this was a time where I was really going through dealing with we talk about financial scarcity versus financial abundance and how it's a mindset. I actually just got back from a missions trip down in Cuba, and for everyone listening, like the Cuban people, beautiful culture. The average Cuban lives on less than $5 USD per month. Access to clean water is not a thing. Access to healthy food is not a thing. And I was having a conversation with one of the translators there, and he said, David, we don't live in a normal society. So when Americans are talking about like dreams and aspirations and goal setting and like financial planning, he's like, those aren't even things that we can entertain. But we derive so much joy and satisfaction, fulfillment in life from relationships because we can help each other. And what I learned, this mentor of mine years ago, she was challenging me. She said, David, why do you have a hard time buying stuff that you want? I was like, because I feel guilty. Like if I don't need it, right? If it's something that I want, I'm like, I could have used that money for other things. And she says, do you feel the same way about water? Like, what do you mean about water? She's like, well, you know that there's people around the world that struggle to get water. When you take a water bottle out and you drink it, do you feel guilty that you're like filling yourself with water and they don't have access? Do you feel like you're taking something from them? I said, I've never really thought about that. And she said, well, what if you took a whole bottle of water and you just went outside and poured it on the ground, just completely wasted it? Do you think you're taking anything away from the other people that are struggling and need access to water? I was like, no. She said, well, why do you feel that way about money? Because when I go to spend money, right, there's a difference between spending and investing. When I go to spend money, I feel this like, well, I could have used this, right? And we all know the story. Travis, you and I know the story of Mary, and she breaks the perfume over Jesus's feet, and all the disciples are like, yeah, but all that money, right, could have been sold and given to, like, could have been given to people that are poor and in need. And what I've learned, the mindset shift that has to happen for many people about money comes from a book called The Wealth Mindset by Neville Goddard, and it was this beautiful awareness of that in his life he was treating money through the frame of spending. Everything he was doing was spending. I'm spending my money on rent. I'm spending my money on clothes. I'm spending my money on food. But if you just shift that and you start thinking through the frame of investing, it will change your entire perspective on money. I'm investing in this vacation for my family to get closer. I'm investing in this business for the long term. I'm investing in buying this vehicle because of X, Y. I'm investing. I'm expecting a return on my investment instead of just spending. And that one little shift will cause you to start to be more intentional with the money that you do have, and recognize that if you really do have a heart for people that are in need and people that are poor or struggling, then you have a responsibility to succeed and be a good steward so that those funds can flow through your hands and be a blessing to other people, that you can be the person to affect change in those areas. So that was a long way of saying, stop spending, start investing. Every dollar that flows through your hands, even if you're buying lunch, see it through the frame of investment. And when you do that, your relationship with money will change significantly.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to segue into our final round here, man. I've enjoyed the conversation. We just do a part 2 at some point. Let's just have some quick hitting random questions, quick hitting random answers. You ready?
Yeah, man.
Give me a flex and a fail, David. A purchase you're stoked that you made. It could be anything. It could be something like super serious, or it could be something super frivolous.
Okay.
And then a purchase that you regret making because it was just a complete waste.
Man, I would say that, man, purchase wise, this is tough, man. Biggest flex. I mean, it kind of ties it. My biggest flex is I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my kids and my wife
Hmm.
every day. That's my biggest flex. And it comes from a place of complete gratitude. I'm just so freaking grateful, man. Stupidest one or poorest decision, I would say, is getting into crypto before I understood it.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, every crypto call I've made, besides like the big three, like Bitcoin, Ethereum,
Right?
Solana, they've all failed me. Couldn't agree more. What profession other than your own do you think that it would be fun to master?
What profession other than my own would be fun to master? I would probably have to say neuroscience. So it touches what I do, and I am involved a lot in it, but I'm not an actual scientist. And so really being able to get in there and understand like behavioral psychology and how the brain works and creates new neural pathways and changes behavior and actions, that is just fascinating to me because it affects how we feel about ourselves so significantly.
If you could sit on a park bench with someone, past or present, and chat for an hour, who would it be?
It would have to be Jesus. I just want to hang out with him. That's all I want to do now.
How do you like to learn best? Books, blogs, podcasts, YouTube, newsletters?
So learning best for me, I love to read. Like that's what I enjoy the most. But the most effective learning for me is in person. And so if I can get to an event, a conference, if I can rub shoulders, if I can actually have face to face interaction, so I'd say that kind of parlays over into podcasting and even YouTube. So if I can really hear. I need context. I'm a very contextual person. And so if I can have the full scope of context, I can usually grasp a concept pretty well and be able to implement rather quickly.
What's a money-making book that you'd you've already given 2 or 3 recommendations. If you had to distill it to one, what's the money-making book you'd recommend?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the man. I am a big fan of what he taught in that book. And just incredible principles.
Last thing as we wrap up here, man, where can people go to get more from you?
Yeah, just without in the least pretentious way possible, just Google my name. You can find
David Waldy, Waldy. Google David Waldy. He's on TikTok. He's on whatever social you're on. He's on. He's putting out some really great information about how to make money, how to build wealth, change your mindset, and become a high performer in multiple areas of your life. David, I've enjoyed the conversation. Everybody else listening, tuning in, remember, money only solves your money problems, but it's a little bit easier to solve your other problems if you're got some money in the bank. So let's solve that one first here on the Travis Makes Money podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks so much for your time, David. Peace out, everybody.
Thank you, Travis.